begin with, could I ask you to say your name and when you were born?
Yes. In Vietnamese, they call me Nguyen Ngoc Duy, and in English, it's reversed. So it's Duy Nguyen.
And when were you born?
I was born on the 15th of February, 1960.
And to help us understand the context, could you describe for us your life in the early 1970s, before the end of the war?
Oh, I was just a student before 1975, or at 1975. I was 15 years old, so my job was nothing but going to school.
Where did you live?
I lived in Vũng Tàu, which is kind of a beach city about 100 kilometers south of Saigon, the old capital of Vietnam.
What did your parents do for a living?
They're not like trained professionals, so they just did everything that they could to feed us. My dad did farming, growing vegetables and the Vietnamese sweet potatoes. And my mom helped my dad, and so did we. Myself and my brothers and my sister.
How many children were you?
4 altogether.
And were you the oldest or?
I'm the second youngest.
The second youngest?
Yes.
So how did your life change at the end of the war?
It was just like everyone else's. It was changed drastically in a way, in an unpleasant way that no one wished for. It was bad. Right after the end of the war, or in other words, right after the Vietnamese communists from the north took over South Vietnam, or invaded South Vietnam, my family went into a crisis, kind of financial crisis or living crisis, because all the things that we were doing to make a living were gone, and I couldn't go to school anymore. At that time, I had just completed my 9th grade, but then I stopped there. I couldn't afford to go to school anymore. The first reason was because financially we were in a very hard situation, and the next thing was because when communists dominated Vietnam, South Vietnam, they brought with them all the evil theories that they would force students in school to learn, and I refused to go for that. So for those 2 main reasons, I stopped going to school and started to work for a living and support my family to make a living for all of us at the age of 15. Yeah.
What happened to your parents' livelihood, growing vegetables and selling vegetables?
Well, they couldn't do the same as they did before the Viet Cong took over South Vietnam, and they took our land. They seized our land illegally, and they stopped everyone from trading products or selling products. Right after they took over South Vietnam, life became a crisis, especially food. We were drastically lack of food, and they used that as a method to control people's life. So they banned people from transporting food, even small amount for your own consumption, from one place to another, from one small town to another, or from another, a part of a town to another part of the town. So that was their tactic, their way of controlling people. And because of that, we still try to produce some sweet potatoes and other farm products, but we couldn't sell, right? Because they stopped.
They prohibited all forms of commerce, all forms of
Right,
trade.
right. I had some friends that didn't have any piece of land to grow their vegetable or farm products for their own living. So they had to go and find a way to buy stuff from one location and bring it to another location to resell for a little bit of profit, but they got caught and seized their products very often. It was awful.
And when you dropped out of school to help your family find money, what kinds of jobs did you do?
There were not specific jobs that were available because there were no factories there. There were no companies or organizations that would employ people in Vung Tau and in South Vietnam in general after we lost the war. So we had to use any means available to do it, like going and help someone fix their house, and they can pay you not with money but with some food, right? Or you can go and see whoever has a piece of land that needed some help. Then you go and work with them, and then they return your labor with a little bit of food. Is kind of that. Yeah.
When did you decide to leave?
I decided to leave right away after we lost the war. That was April 30th, 1975. Even though I wasn't an adult, but I was old enough to see things that happened around me and saw the evil and danger of communism. And in fact, I wasn't born in Vung Tau, right? I was born in central Vietnam, in a province called Quang Ngai. Do you know that? Okay. And because of the communists, it wasn't safe to live in a countryside in Quang Ngai. So my parents decided to move from the countryside to a safer zone, and they kept doing that. And every time they did that, they left. They had to leave everything behind, including their land and their house and other properties that they couldn't move with them. Only if they had some jewels, some cash, they would take with them. And we moved to escape the control of the communists at least 3 times, from the countryside, starting from the countryside to a safer town, and then they kept chasing us, or they kept expanding their control zone. So we had to move again to another town that's closer to the province downtown, and it was still not safe enough. So finally, after the Tet offensive of the Year of the Monkey, which was 1968, we call that cuộc thảm sát Tết Mậu Thân in Vietnamese.
The massacre.
Yeah.
The massacre?
Yeah, it was called the Monkey Tet Offensive or the Tet Massacre, right? So after that tragedy, we were lucky. My area where we lived was invaded as well, but we were lucky enough that we survived. My dad had to run as soon as he heard the news that the communists were coming. He ran out of the house and he went into a sugarcane farm, which was large and very bushy, so he managed to hide in there for 3 days. Otherwise, I believe that he would have been killed if the communists saw him, because at that time he was roughly about 40, and the age that the communists wanted to, get rid of, right? And my whole family was lucky enough to survive that event. And right after that, my dad decided to move to another location that was very close to the heart of the province, where our government offices were located, and where all the military forces were there, and the police stations were there. So we considered that was a safer zone. But then later on we decided, because of the attack or assassinations that happened at night by the Vietnamese communists to foreign people that lived in that area to run business, and to other government officers, then my dad said, that's it. It's not safe to stay in Quang Ngai. So he decided to move our whole family to Saigon. That happened in late 1968.
Can we back up a bit?
Sure.
For some,
Please.
A bit more detail.
Sure.
So you left the countryside in Quang Ngai. What year was that?
I believe that was, it was a long time ago, but I try to recall. Of course, it may not be accurate, but I believe it was late 1965 when I was about six years old.
And where did you move to a town?
Yeah, we moved from like a small country town to another small country town.
What was the name?
The town where I was born and lived in. The first one was called Sơn Tây. It's like, it comes long in different sizes. Like it's called Họ Phước Thọ. That means like Phước Thọ Catholic community. That was the smallest unit. Xã Sơn Tây, which means
Hamlet?
Yeah, Sơn Tây. Quận Sơn Tịnh, which is like a county, Sơn Tịnh County, and the province was Quang Ngai.
And where did you go to from there?
We went to, this is a hard recall, but I'll try my best. We went from Sơn Tây to Phu Hòa, which is like a larger town.
And it was there that you experienced the Tết Mậu Thân attack?
Yes.
At Phu Hòa?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. My mom and dad had some relative in Phu Hòa who was wealthy. So they were kind enough to provide us with a piece of land, like a part of their large land, so that my dad could build a house for us. And then my mom started to do business right away by buying rice, the Vietnamese rice in large bags. Then she would turn around and resell them in smaller amounts to resellers who would come and get like 20 scoops or 30 scoops per, and then they would bring to the market and resell to the users in like 1 scoop or 2 scoops at a time. Life in Vietnam was that poor and difficult,
And do you have memories of the Tết Mậu Thân?
Yes.
What do you remember?
It's hard to explain, but I somehow have memory of everything. Yeah. So what would you like to know about Tết Mậu Thân?
Can you describe to us like what you heard and saw during
Sure.
that, during that attack?
Yeah. It'll be my honor to share the memories with everyone, and I hope to be shared to others as well. That happened on the first day of January 1968 in the lunar calendar year, right? Which we call Tết, or the Vietnamese New Year's Day. Very early on that date, we woke up and trying to get ready for that traditionally big day in which we would get together, excuse me, around a table, and we would take turn to wish our parents all the best things to come on New Year's. And then the plan was to move to other relatives' houses and celebrate with them. But then, even before we got things ready, before even we got around the table, there were gunfire everywhere. It was like, at first I personally had a wrong impression. I thought it was pháo.
Firecrackers.
Yeah, pháo. Sorry, I try to say that in Vietnamese first. Firecrackers for the New Year. That actually happened at midnight because people wanted to celebrate the New Year's Eve by using the firecrackers. So at that time, I at first thought it was firecrackers, for the new day, and then it was louder, and there were other stronger sounds. So we were very scared and confused, and then just a short while later, our neighbor, who was my dad's friend, ran over to our house and told my mom and dad that Việt Cộng tới, which means the Vietnamese communists are coming, or they are attacking. And that shocked our whole family.
It was shocking because traditionally that was a time of ceasefire.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that. Thank you for your reminder. There was a ceasefire agreement between the North and South Vietnam, or Republic of Vietnam, that they would cease fire for, if I'm not mistaken, 3 days, so that people would have peace for the traditional New Year and celebrate the New Year with their family. So the South Vietnam government, based on that agreement, let a lot of soldiers go home to see their family and celebrate the New Year with their family, and that was like a trap, a dirty trap from the Vietnamese communists from the north. They try to set us up with that kind of agreement, so that when we were not aware, they attacked, right? So yeah, a lot of people mentioned that, and we remember that. And then it was shocking for everyone, and for us, because I was still young. I was I believe I was 9 years old. Not even 9, 8, because I was 8 years old at that time. So I don't think they would kill me. I didn't think they would kill me, but I was still scared, and I tried to hide myself under a bed, right? But before I did that, I knew that my dad knew that it was like a life danger for him, so he told my mom and us that he would go to the sugarcane farm to hide, and then the Viet Cong came. Oh, I still remember their images, like it happened yesterday. They were so brutal. They were so angry. They were so scary. And a lot of them were young. They were like, they didn't look like real soldiers, you know. They were, some were like in their mid-20s. A lot of them were in their teen ages. And all of them carried like a machine gun. I think it's the popular AK-47, right? And some of them carry long, I don't remember the name. I knew the names, but I can't recall just right now. Yeah, if I remember, I'll let you know. But they were very scary. They carried their weapon, and they came into town. They came into every house like they were ready to kill everyone, right? When they got into my house, the first thing they did was they yelled very loudly, just like they want to take your spirit and your soul away from your body. They said, "Who is here?" Right? In Vietnamese, of course. And where's the man of the house? And my mom said, oh, my husband went away for work. And they said, are you sure? Is it true? And they pointed the weapon at my mom's face. You know, there's a blade, a sharp blade that they attach to the top of their gun, and when they point that to your face, it was very scary, just like you're ready to die anytime when they stab you with that weapon, or they can just pull the trigger and then you're gone. And they did that with a lot of Vietnamese people when they invaded most of the towns and cities in South Vietnam in that massacre, right? So back to the little story about my mom's business. She bought rice in big bags, and we stacked them in a corner, and at the bottom we put skids to prevent them from getting damaged, right? Then they went there. They saw the stack of rice, bags of rice, and the skid. They shouted, "Where's your secret? What do you call hum?
Bunker."
Yes, thank you. Is there a secret bunker down here? My mom said no, and they turned to my sister, who was 2 years older than me, right? She was 11 years old, or not quite 11. She was 10-year-old girl, and they turned to my sister and asked, "Is that true, or is there a bunker down here, a secret bunker? Who are you hiding down there?" They said that in a very scary voice, right? In a very loud and threatening voice. And my sister was so scared she couldn't even answer. So I had to help her. I said, "Please, my sister is very scared, and she's a girl. Can you not talk that loud and in that kind of manner to her?" And they turned to me and they said, "Shut up! If you trouble me, if you talk before I allow you, I will kill you." Right? And you know what happened? They asked us, a lady who was my mom, a young girl who was my sister, and myself, to remove all those bags of rice from that stack, big stack. And each of the bags weighed 100 kilograms. Can you believe it? That means about 210 pounds per bag, and it was very hard for us to move. But somehow, because we were so scared, we were not ourselves anymore. We just knew one thing, that either we do what they ordered or die. So all three of us went to that stack of bags of rice and moved them in a way that we couldn't believe that we could do. As soon as we removed those bags, they asked us to remove the wooden skid, and immediately they used their weapon, the guns with the blade at the top, to stick down to the ground area to find the bunker. Right? But there was no bunker. It was just solid soil. So they couldn't find anything, and they went around to the back of the house where we kept a stack of dead trees, for cooking. They asked. At that time, there was only my sister at the back. Again, who was a 10-year-old girl. They ordered her to move those logs. They were, this big and long, from like 2-3 meters, a big stack like that. They ordered her to move, and she didn't know what else to do but, following their order or get harmed or get killed, right? So I don't know how she managed that, but she moved all the logs, and they did the same thing to find the bunker, but there was nothing. We were not related to the government or the military forces. We were just civilians, right? And that's a story that happened with my own family. Together with that, even though I wasn't there to witness, but I read the news, I heard from the radio, I heard from other people that went to Hue. Do you know Hue? Of course you do. Sorry for my question, but Hue was the old capital of Vietnam. You know that, right? There were 3 capitals: Thăng Long, that later on became Hanoi, and Hue, and Saigon. So Hue was the old capital, with lots of beautiful sights and scenes, and people, beautiful people, nice people. They invaded Hue for a month, and when they got defeated by the the South Vietnam's forces. They left, and later on we found thousands of people that had been killed, murdered, and buried in mass graves. There were mass graves that contained from tens to hundreds of people, and they found a lot of people buried alive, because of the way that they found their corpses. Right? Some of them were tied very tightly like this with the telephone lines in a way that one wouldn't be able to breathe like normal. And some of them were with their heads smashed with holes or shovels, and it was terrible. It was unbelievable that people would do that to other people, especially when we call each other Đồng Bào, which means brothers from the same tomb, right? But that was what the Vietnamese communists from the north did to our family and our people in 1968, which was a shame in our history and a wound in my heart for my whole life. Yeah.
And your father escaped because he hid in among the bamboo canes. I'm sorry, the sugar canes.
Sugar cane. Yeah.
For 3 days.
Because they invaded our area for only 3 days, but we knew that my dad, that was hiding in the sugarcane farm, wouldn't survive without food. So we couldn't make any move. We dare not make any move on the first day because everything was hot, and we didn't want to point out where my dad was hiding to those communists. So we stayed still for the first day. But the second day, my mom made some food, and she packaged it and asked me to do it very carefully and secretly to bring to my dad. So I hid that inside my shirt, and I pretended as I was going to, it's a funny story, but in the countryside in Vietnam, no one has a toilet.
And your dad survived that date attack because he hid in the sugar canes for 3 days.
He did indeed, and that was very fortunate for him and our family. Yeah, and luckily they only invaded our town for 3 days, and they were pushed away from the South Vietnam's forces. And but we knew that my dad would be staying there without food. So, but because it was still hot, they were still around, and they still very aggressive. The Viet Cong. So we decided not to do anything on the first day in terms of helping my dad, because we didn't want to lead him into where he was hiding. So we had to let him stay hungry. But on the second day, my mom prepared some food and packaged it in a small bag and gave it to me, and she asked me to bring it to my dad in a very secret and careful way. So I realized everything. So I said, yes, I'll do my best, and I hid that bag of food inside my shirt, and I pretended as I was going to the toilet, the natural toilet, you know what I mean, right? Because in the countryside in Vietnam, no house had a toilet, right? We had to go to the land, or to the farm, or to the bushes, and use those places as natural toilet. So I pretended as I was going there for my need, and as soon as I got to the sugarcane farm, I snuck in, and I had to walk silently through a huge area, maybe a few acres, right? And I divide that into small lanes, so I walked back and forth to the next lane, and then moved to the next lane and back and forth again to find my dad, because I couldn't call him and ask, "Where are you, Dad?" Because I didn't want to expose where he was hiding to the Viet Cong. But after a very long time and depressing, I had to start calling him in like a low voice, "Dad, where are you?" Right? And I kept doing that as I walked through the field of sugar canes until I heard a reply, "I'm here." He said in Vietnamese, "Da ở đây nè con." That means, "Dad is here, my son." So I was so relieved hearing that, and I managed to bring the food to my dad, and I kept supplying him that way for the next day, so he could survive until the Viet Congs were pushed out of the city. Then I went back there and took him home. Yeah. And I still remember the whole thing and all the feelings, all the nervousness, all the worries as I was doing that, and the whole thing during the 3-day invading our town. And thank God my dad went on to live with us until he was 89, right? After I came here, and then my brother and my sister came here to Toronto. We made a sponsorship application for my parents in 1983, and 10 years later they were granted the visa, and they moved here to reunite with us and live with us until 2006. That was the year my dad went back to Vietnam and passed away, and my mom went with him the following year.
So it was soon after the Tết Mậu Thân, the offensive, that your father moved your family again towards.
Yes. After that event, sorry, I forgot one detail. That after they were pushed away, after the 3 days that they invaded our town, and they were pushed away, my mom and dad decided to move us to the downtown area of Quang Ngai. Quang Ngai is a province, but it's also a city, right? So they moved away from that house because they didn't want to wait there and face the Vietnamese communists when they moved back again. And that was very, very lucky for us You won't imagine what happened. Soon after we moved from that house to a safer area, they shelled our house, right? And the whole house and the next door neighbor's house, both of them were destroyed completely. And because of the bags of rice that my mom bought for her business, we were still in that house. It kept burning for a few days, right? The flame went down, but the fire was still there for a few days. And we heard the news from other people that live in the neighborhood. So we went back there to see, and all we could do was cry for the whole house that was, shelled and burned down to the ground. And that carried away all the property that my mom and dad rebuilt since they moved there. And then we went back to the new area, and we stayed there for another few months until near the end of 1968 that my parents decided to move to Saigon. In their thought, that was a way to have complete safety. Yeah.
And you lived in Vũng Tàu, not exactly.
Right.
Saigon.
We actually moved to Saigon, which was the current capital of South Vietnam, or Republic of Vietnam, because we had our uncle there, who was my mother's younger brother, and he offered to help us in our new arrival. But after living in Saigon for a few months, my dad said cost of living there was a bit high, and there was no farming or housework, construction work for him to do. And we had another uncle who was my mother's oldest brother, who lived in Vũng Tàu. So my parents talked to him, and were impressed by him that Vũng Tàu would be a more peaceful, easier to live, and there would be work available for my parents. So we decided to move down to Vũng Tàu soon after we arrived in Saigon. And I lived there until I fled from Vietnam.
And so soon after April 1975, when you decided that you had to leave again, that wasn't your first time leaving a home and starting a new life. You had been doing that, for many years during the war.
Yeah, there was a phrase in Vietnamese that derived from people fleeing the country. They said, even if the power pole has legs, they would escape the Vietnamese communists. They would flee the country for freedom. So by saying that, I mean most, or if not all, the Vietnamese people in South, even from the North and Central, if they had a chance, they would not hesitate to flee the country for freedom. And that was why I wanted to go right away. But, my family was not a wealthy one. My parents were not rich. They didn't have much for us. So for the first few years, I witnessed a lot of friends and neighbors escaping the country without believing that I would be able to do the same. Until 1977, so slightly over 2 years after the loss of Saigon, they called me to do military duties. So they asked me to go and have a general checkup. So I did, and at that time I was 17, turning 18, and I was in good health. I was like a crazy soccer player. So I believe I was in physical shape, good physical shape. So I did, and they said, you are 100%. So go home and wait until you get the order, right? And the order came a short while later. But because of the history of running away from the communist, I consider myself an anti-communist person. And I decided there was no way in the world that I would go and contribute my life to serve the communists. Especially at that time, they were sending troops to attack Cambodia, right? And a lot of other people were sent there, and they died there. And I heard of that news, so I said, no way, right? I'm a man of freedom. I'm a man of democracy. I'm a man that is anti-communist. Why should I go and serve them and contribute my life to them? So at any price, I have to stay away from there. So when they sent me the order to go and report to the military control office, I disappeared, right? And as soon as I disappeared, I went and made connection with people that were organizing boat escape, so that they would put me on their list and ask me to join them when the time comes. And when you go and make that connection and you want to have a spot reserved, you gotta pay quite a bit of money. At that time, money didn't have like a real value. So the main means of paying people was gold, right? Flat piece. What do you call those? Cây vàng. Well, anyway, just,
A thread, there's a chỉ vàng is a thread, but I don't know what cây vàng is.
Cây vàng is like two flat tabs together with one short tab. Altogether, they make an ounce or something like a unit that they use for trading. Yeah. In Vietnamese, they call it lượng vàng, which is an official term, and like the slang term is cây vàng or cây, right? They may say to you, if you want to come, if you want to join me, give me 5 cây, right?
Where did you go when you disappeared? How did you live?
It was 3 pressing years that I lived before I managed to escape. So I didn't have any specific address or location to stay, because they sent teams of cops or military groups to my house to get me, right? Because I didn't follow their order, right? And I was hiding around. So they often send groups of their forces to my house to find me and maybe bring me to their court or whatever. But I gotta play it smart. I didn't let anyone know the location that I was hiding at. But I grew up there. I went there in the beginning of 1969. To that time, I had lived there for 6, 7 years, right? 9 years. Sorry, my calculation is slow. 77 plus 1 year, that was 8 years. I had lived there for 8 years. So I had lots of friends in my small community, Catholic community. In Vietnamese we call Sư Đạo, or like a small parish. Actually, it was a parish. And then the neighboring parishes or villages. I had a lot of friends. And there were some friends that were fishermen. So I went and stayed on their boats and went to do fishing with them. But you know, the main problem was not that, it was food, because it was lack of food, like a food crisis for everyone. Lots of people worked very hard, but they still didn't have enough food for their own consumption in their family. So it was hard to expect some food from friends, for myself. So I was often hungry, very hungry. There were nights that I hadn't had anything in my stomach for days, and I was ready to die because of lack of food. You know, it was hard. But basically, to answer your question, I was hiding around, sometimes in my own parish, sometimes in other neighboring parishes, sometimes in other close-by villages with my friends and their family, until I managed to escape. Yeah.
How, tell me about your attempts to escape.
Well, I first tried to make connections with whoever I believe would have a boat, small or medium or large, doesn't matter. I made connections with them and asked them to reserve a spot for me. And most of them were kind enough to accept my offer. So in 1977, I joined at least 3 to 4 groups. And every time I joined one group, I had to contribute a part of my total fee. Normally, it would be from 3 to 5 ounces of solid gold or lượng vàng. As I described earlier, 2 taps this long and 1 tap this short to form 1 lượng vàng, or 1 ounce of solid gold in Vietnamese term. So the price would be from 3 to 5 ounces, like that. And at least you gotta give them 1 as a deposit.
Where did you find that money?
Well, I didn't have those, so I had to do a combination by offering them a little bit of gold together with my service, my work, in which they could ask me to go and connect with people or inform people that they already gave the spots to. It was a very dangerous job that way, but I didn't have enough money or gold, so I had to do that. I gave them a little bit, like a ring or a small piece of gold that I got from my mom, and together with my service, because they knew that I knew people there, and all the roads, all the infrastructure there, and it would be helpful. So most of them accepted that. But we tried for almost 3 years, from the second half of 1977 until the end of, near the end of, no, did I say 1977? okay, until near the end of 1980 without successful. There were times that I got on the boat and we were leaving, but there were always some kind of problem at the last minute that stopped us from leaving the country. But luckily, I never got caught. A lot of people got caught and arrested, and they were brought into prisons, and normally they were kept there for a few weeks to a few months, just for the main purpose of scaring them to get their money or gold from their family or from their own if they carry any with them, just like a ransom, you know. And for the second purpose, that you're not supposed to leave the country that way. You know, it's illegal that you leave the country and go to another country in secret like that. They scare them. But some other people were, unfortunately, got labeled for bad crimes, and or some of them didn't have money or gold to give them to buy their freedom. Then they got kept there or transferred to other serious, more serious places, and they got kept there for and tortured for years. Some of them were like that. Or if they had some impression that you may have some gold, like good amount of gold that you hid somewhere without telling them, they would keep you there and try to torture you and kept asking until they get what they wanted.
So how many times did your attempts fail?
I would say more than 10 times, and I lost all the money and gold that my mom gave me to the last piece. And at that time, it was near the end of 1980 that I didn't have anything else to offer people for my escape. So I went back to talk to my mom at night in secret, because I was at that time was still under their chasing. I talked to my mom, and she went to her room, and then she came back with her necklace and her ring and my dad's ring, and she said, "These are the last pieces that our family possessed, right? That's all that we have whatsoever, and these are my wedding jewel." So I never wanted to lose them. I wanted to keep with me until the end of my life, or even pass them on to your sister. But because of your safety and your freedom, take them. I took my mom's wedding ring and necklace for my freedom. I'll never be able to repay my mom and my dad. It's been almost 40 years. I'm sorry. That's okay. Just sorry that I'm wasting your time. But you know, it's been almost 40 years. But the image of my mom handing me her wedding jewels to buy my freedom is still clear in my mind and my heart. I kept wishing to have a way to repay her love, and we did somehow. We sponsored our parents and brought them here and lived with them in the same house since 1993 until the last visit back to Vietnam in 2006. So that was 13 years that they both lived with us, not only at my house, but at my sister's and my brother's house. All three of our families had a room reserved for our parents, and they were free to choose, say, if they were living with me in their room, and all of a sudden they wanted to go to my brother's house. They would just tell me or call my brother and say, "Oh, I want to go to Gung's house," and we performed whatever they requested right away. And then later on, they wanted to move to my sister's house, and the length that they stay depended completely, on them. They wanted to move after a day or a week or a month. It was completely dependent on them. And we lived happily together, that way for 13 years until my dad passed away. And then my mom followed him the next year in 2007. So we did what we could to show our love to our parents and repay somehow. But I still don't believe that I have repaid them enough or near enough, But at least I feel that my heart was good, that God gave me and my brother and sister and our families a chance to live with my parents again for like a very meaningful period of time. Yeah.
You more than fulfilled your obligations.
Thank you.
So to continue, your mom had given you the last of her gold. Was that enough for you to arrange for your voyage?
Actually, I wanted to emphasize that it was the last piece of her gold. It was her wedding jewels. Okay? So it means way more than regular gold. Unfortunately, it was not enough, but I tried to use that to contribute gas or fuel to other groups that I knew of, so that they would count me in their group to go. But then we kept failing until all that money was the money that I got from selling my my mom's wedding jewels was completely gone, and I still couldn't go because they kept failing. You know, no one lied to me or try to set up trap to get my money or stole money from me, but we kept failing out one after another until all the money was gone. Then I felt that I was stuck. I was at a dead end and didn't have any way or any chance for my life anymore. I was completely hopeless at that time, and I believe God had a plan for me. Right at the time that I believed that I was completely hopeless, then that night a friend rode a bike to me and said, "Tonight is the night." Our friend who owned a good-sized boat had a plan to go, and he wanted to give you a seat, just with a condition that you carry some fuel and food that you can manage to hide in your small boat. It wasn't actually my boat, it was my friend's boat that I mentioned earlier that I went to go fishing with him. But that friend was with me, so he would allow me to do that. And the friend said that friend would be allowed to send his younger brother with you, so the two of you will be reserved seats in the boat, right? So at that time I didn't have any money, but because of the money that we spent earlier, we had some fuel and food bought for other plans left over. So we agreed to that plan, and planned to bring my friend's boat together with the fuel and food, and the two of us to the big boat, and would meet in the middle of the river current and merge at midnight. But then we waited until midnight, and there was no signal. We waited another few hours in a manner that was very depressing, and up until almost 4:30 in the morning, that friend rode the bike back and said they had found out and captured, arrested most of the people that were gathering there to go on this boat. So it's a very dangerous situation now. You can decide whether you go straight, forget about your small boat with all the supplies, walk straight to that boat and jump into the boat, or you can skip this one, because this is the last plan. The owner of the boat, who was the mutual friend to both of us, was still free, and he will take his direct family to the boat with the crew already ready on the boat, and he would jump onto the boat and go. So I had a hard time thinking and deciding, because it was really dangerous. I couldn't verify if it would be a trap already set up there and waiting for us. But then I said, it's been many long years, and we have tried other plans, and nothing happened I still couldn't escape, so this is the only chance, so let's try. So I took my friend's younger brother, and we both walked to the port. I call it a port, but it's just like a small, long wooden bridge that they tie their boats on the two sides. So we walked there, and I saw it. When I got there, it was after 5 in the morning, and along the bridge line, I saw small groups of children covered with a blanket to sleep. And I woke some of them. I woke most of the group. Some of them, when I tapped, they resisted. They complained. They said, "Oh, what are you doing? We're sleeping." But I tapped harder on them. I said, "The boat is about to leave. You got to wake up and go." Because there were children of poor family that didn't have gold and money, and but they still wanted to escape the communists. So they went to those bridges and waited for a boat to leave so that they could jump onto and go for free. So I woke, because I knew that boat would be empty, So I woke most of the groups and managed to get them to join us in that journey. So at 5:20 a.m., that family of mine who owned the boat walked to the boat and walked onto the boat, and the guy at the front just with a knife just cut the rope. Then we left. As we were leaving, lots of people that were going home from church heard of the noises. So they ran to the bridge, and lots of them, as we were leaving, I looked back, and I saw a lot of people with, church clothing, staying on the bridge, and some of them were yelling, some of them were wishing us, good luck. But that was very dangerous because the communist cops could find out and chase us. But luckily, somehow, that was the last try that I did, and it was successful. We went on the ocean for 6 days until we reached a small island in Indonesia before we got transferred on to other bigger islands, and finally to Pulau Galang, who there was a refugee camp there with lots of people. So we joined them at the end of 1980. Yeah.
Can I go back to and clarify a few things?
Sure.
Just a few follow-up
Sure.
questions. So your job with this last attempt was to use your friend's small boat with fuel and some food,
Yeah.
and with the friend's younger brother.
Yeah.
Get out there, meet at midnight.
Yeah.
And then when you got there, you waited in the boat or on the shoreline?
We stay in my friend's house to wait for the signal. And we kept waiting anxiously. And because of those things happening at the spot where they kept their passengers, it was somehow discovered by the Viet Cong's cops. So they got arrested.
So the other passengers
Yeah.
of that boat were were being
Kept.
slowly gathering.
Yeah,
and
maybe days
trying
before
trying to stay hidden
Yeah.
in a particular shelter.
Right.
And that shelter was discovered.
Yeah.
And so the passengers were all caught.
Yeah.
But the captain was not.
Yeah. I'm not sure if all of them were caught. Some of them sometimes when they discover a hidden secret place to keep people and get them ready for the journey, they would fire a few shots and try to scare people, but some of them were still try to run away, right? So I'm not sure if they were all caught or just most of them or some of them.
But the danger was that if some of them were caught, they might reveal what the plan was.
Yeah.
Was that the danger that you were facing?
Right, yeah. But I think we were lucky enough that they didn't have enough time to do that, before we, the captain and the owner of the boat and myself went to the boat and left. So I think we were very blessed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Please continue. So now you're in Indonesia in a refugee camp.
Yeah.
Did you arrive at Galang right away? Or?
No. We went to a small unidentified island where people didn't speak English, and we hardly spoke English even. Right? But luckily there was one man that used to work for an American company, so he spoke some English. So he tried to make connection with them and explain, our situation. But those islanders, couldn't make any head or tails of what we were talking about. But they give us signs, hand signs, saying that, don't worry, just stay here. And then they would go and report the incident to their authorities. So we waited there for like a day, and then some people, like a higher level authorities, traveled by boat to, from a bigger island to talk to our group and said, they heard about the refugee things, so they would make connections and find out what is next to do, and it's like that we kept getting transferred from one island to another one until we got to a larger island called Area, on which we stayed for 2 weeks, and met with some representatives of the United Nations High Commissioners for Refugees to arrange for like the final transportation to bring us from that island to Galang, where we stay and where we actually lived and trained for job skills, for English speaking skills and other stuff until we leave the island to a third country. Yeah.
Why did you choose Canada?
Well, because it's the best country in the world. Sorry, that's my quick answer, but in details. After I arrived in Galang for about 4.5 months, then I was interviewed by an American delegation, in which they said I was accepted due to a sponsorship application by my first cousin who lived in Louisiana, in the U.S., and they asked me if I would like to accept that. I said, as a refugee, I am not supposed to refuse any country that would accept me, but I like to know if I have to go to the U.S. or do you have to take me there? Because if not, then I would like you to put me back, put my file back without forcing me. And that officer was shocked with my statement, and he said, "What's wrong with you? Are you okay? You know, are you sure you don't want to go to the United States?" I said, "I would love to, but I have some friends in Canada that had left Vietnam just shortly before me, and they're living in Canada, that I like to rejoin them." I just said that because I didn't want to say more and kind of like hurt their feelings or give them any wrong impression, right? But in my heart, I loved Canada. And I also did not like very much the way that the U.S. government cut all the military support for the Republic of Vietnam's. Sorry, I want to say this again. I didn't agree with the way that the U.S. government decided to cut all the military support for the Republic of Vietnam's and their forces to fight against the communists, and led us to the loss of South Vietnam. That is a big debate, so I won't get deeper into it. But that was something in my heart that I did not want to go to the U.S. because of that. I honestly didn't like a country that betrayed their ally, especially an ally that had fought alongside with them for years to defend the free side of the world, right? And to prevent the communists or the red wave from expanding south to other countries like Vietnam, South Korea, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and further south. So that was, to me, was a very bad and unacceptable act. It was like a pure betrayal to France. So in my heart, I did not want to accept that. So because of that, the officer agreed to put my file back, but he had to make a note that I refused to go to the U.S., even though he didn't make any kind of like serious comment. And I think I was thankful for that. And just a couple months later, the Canadian delegation came to the island, and I was called to an interview. And luckily in that interview, I was accepted.
How did you come to know about Canada?
I read, there was a small library at the side of the Catholic Church, where my friend was working there, so I went to see her very often, and I also read.
Oh, in
that, yeah, there was a small library, but people sent in lots of books. You know, they donated books, and also Father Gildo Dominici, who was our pastor, was very aggressive in getting literatures, books, and all kinds of stuff to supply the library for us to get information. So I went there and I read about Canada, and I loved the way that Canada was so peaceful, with all the wonderful people, the most wonderful people in the world here. and they participated in the Second World War just to defend the free countries from the invasion of those like Germany and Italy in the Second World War, right? So I like that, and also I found out that Canada always played a big and important roles in keeping peace in conflicted areas in all over the world, and that was like something that I highly valued. And also I knew that Canada was beautiful, so I decided to apply, and I was lucky to get accepted by the Canadian delegation. And after that, I wrote a letter. I can't remember where I sent it, and I didn't get any reply, but I wrote a letter to the Canadian government to state that I would love to go to Toronto, and I would like to settle my life or resettle my life in Toronto of Canada, where I love and I wish to be. And they granted my wish. So they sent me to Toronto, and here I have lived here since 1982. It's been 37 years. 37 and a half years, yes.
So what was your first impression of Canada when you arrived?
It was unpleasant, sorry. But I arrived in Canada on the 21st of February 1980. It was in the middle of the winter, and the snow was up to here. It was really cold, and I didn't have any proper clothing. I did not have a pair of boots or even shoes, no socks. Under my feet were 2 slippers with holes at the heel, and I didn't have much clothing, no sweater or coat. I came with just a pair of worn pants and a thin shirt, and that was everything. No gloves, no hat, no winter gear. And a manpower employee went to the airport to greet me and to bring me to the hotel, where they let us stay until we would rent our own home. As soon as she saw me, she got shocked, and she kept opening her eyes like wildly and asked me if I was okay. She said, "Mr. Nguyen, do you know that this is Canada? You came to Canada in the middle of the winter, and you're dressing like that?" I actually at that time didn't speak English much, but I could understand, and I said to her that I'm poor. I was poor, right? I couldn't say much to communicate with her, but then I believe she understood, and then she walked me to the outside of the building, the terminal building, and waved a taxi. And I looked on the ground, and I found dark and dirty sand all over the place. And it was very cold, and because of the holes on my slippers, my heel contacted the snow, and I almost slipped and fall down a few times. And it was very cold. I believe it was minus at least 25 to 30 Celsius. But I didn't have a sweater even, right? So I was very cold. And I felt better when we got into the taxi. But then after we got along the way, I saw on the street all the dark and dirty sand all over the place. So I said, oh my God, maybe I have chosen the wrong place. Why do they leave sand on the city streets like that? That was my wrong impression, because it was dirty snow, snow in the winter on the road, and it was it changed the color with the car smokes and stuff, right? But I didn't know. That was my first impression. I thought it was a wrong city. That they had that crazy idea of putting sand everywhere, and then soon I found out, and I said, okay, that's at least not sand, so it's okay. And they brought me to a hotel on Charles Street. That's near Young and Charles. I think the name of the hotel, there were two of them side by side, and the generic name for them was Astoria, if I'm not mistaken. But in the last few years, I went back there to see the hotels of my memories, but they were gone. They were not there anymore. Yeah.
And how did the government, did this government official help you? What are the ways did she help you?
Oh, I believe there was a policy for all the government-sponsored refugees, in which we were welcomed at the airport, and then we were taken to the temporary place to live, and we were instructed to go and make use to the city, to the new place, and go and look for a home, for a room, a house, or whatever to rent, and from there they will just send us, or we can go to the manpower office. Every 2 weeks they provided us with a check of $140. So every 4 weeks we have a total of $280 to cover all the living expenses, house rental, food and transportation and everything. So it sounds like a very small amount now, but at that time it wasn't that great, but it was not bad. I managed to cover everything with that kind of money. And also the government gave us a small amount. I don't remember exactly, but it was a couple $100 for the first time and only time, so that I could go and buy my basic clothing and winter gears.
Did you get any language training?
Yes, yeah, but for the first time shopping in Canada, I still remember. I'd like to share with you before I get to that point, that that lady who's, I wish I remembered her name, but I may recall it later. Took me to the hotel, and then the next day or 2 days, there was another lady that came to walk us to Honest Ed's. That was a department store, like a economy department store, where I bought my first pair of boots for the winter, and the first jacket. Unfortunately, they're all gone, and some other clothing from that money provided by the government, to start living here, in comfort. So I'm still thankful to the government and to those ladies, and to this day, and maybe into the end of my life. And in terms of language training, they give us some guidance of where to go, and they helped us register for a language training, and they let us select whether it was French or English to be trained for, and I picked English, of course, because we live in an English-speaking area, and I got trained for 24 weeks. 24 weeks. It was a program at George Brown College. That was the building on College near Bathurst that I went to, and they sent me to the first level. After 4 weeks, I went to the next level, so I managed to stay there to finish my complete English training. So every level for 6 levels was 4 weeks. So I stayed there for 24 weeks. And after the full training, I felt very confident, and I believe it was a very helpful training that the government provided immigrations or refugees with. And after the training, I felt a lot more confident and easy to communicate with anyone that I would meet on the street or anywhere when English communication was needed.
How long did it take before you found your first job?
Not that long. It took me maybe 4 or 5 weeks to wait for the English training course to start, and 24 weeks or 5.5 months for that course. And then after that, maybe within 2-3 weeks, I found my first employment. It was not a great job, but it was something that I needed at that time. Unfortunately, it wasn't in Toronto. It was a friend that was working for a window company in Brampton that knew of my situation, that I was looking for a job. So he offered to bring me in, and I said, fine, please, I needed it. So he went to talk to his employer, and they agreed, and he brought me, and I had to move from Toronto to Brampton. And all the traveling at that time was based on buses or public transit, because I didn't have a car. So it was a bit inconvenient and hard. And I had friends here, so I still didn't want to move completely. So I moved there, and I stayed there from Monday to Friday, or from Sunday evening until Friday afternoon. And at the end of the week, I would pack my bag and move back to join my friends in Toronto to spend the weekend with my friends. And it was fun that way. Yeah.
How long did it take before you felt that you were at home?
For me to feel at home here, I think is very hard to describe that, because when I left Vietnam, I never thought that I would be away for that long. And now I know that it is. I realize that it's not what I was thinking. I have been away from my homeland, from the place where I was born and grew up for 39 years. That is more than half someone's life, and now I have to accept it. But to feel at home here while I'm away from Vietnam is very hard, because I am a man of emotion and loyalty. you know, I know that Canada is my second country. My the place that has accepted me into and provided everything, and I'm thankful, and I will never stop feeling grateful for Canada and its government and its people, but still nothing will replace my homeland, my first place. So I feel more comfortable here after the first couple of years, and now I feel that I belong to this country. I'm a small part of this country, but to feel at home is hard to say, you know.
What were some of the obstacles or challenges that you faced at the beginning when you in your integration experience?
Well, the first thing, and it was very obvious, was the language barrier, because even though I had learned some English when I was in high school in Vietnam from grade 6 to grade 9, when I stopped going to school, there was a number of years since I had stopped learning, and there was practically no chance to practice the second language that I learned there. So even though I had some, you know, knowledge, it was not applicable. It was not useful when I first got here. And I learned some more in the refugee camp to prepare for the life here. It was still not enough. So when I came here, everything was different. The way they spoke the English language was different, and there were lots of sounds that exist in the English language that did not exist in the Vietnamese language. So I had problem learning and overcoming them. Say in Vietnamese we pronounce the th as tha, right? Like you call a girl Thuy, tha, Thuy, but in English you don't pronounce a th sound like that. You go the or tha, like thank or than, right? So, you know, things like that made it very hard for me to learn and to practice and to follow the way that people speak the language here. And so it was very hard, because when I heard people saying something, I didn't understand it completely, at least for the first few months. And when I spoke back, I couldn't say it the same way that they did, and it bothered me a lot. So I decided to push myself that after finished school every day, I didn't go straight home. I went to the park, and I made friends with you know, people, some homeless people, some unidentified people, that any kind of people that I could make friends with, and started a conversation. I would do that every day, just to have a chance to improve my English as quickly as possible. And also I try to carry an English book, English learning book. There was a set of books called English 900 that I used to train myself on the side, that I would carry one of them every day, everywhere I went, even on a bus or at a bus station. And whenever I got stuck with a word in pronouncing or understanding or the meaning, I would, you know, stop a Canadian person at any time and say, "Friend, can you tell me how you pronounce this word? Or can you explain to me the meaning of this word?" And I kept doing that for quite a long time, just, you know, to actually push myself to learn the language, so that I would be able to communicate with people in English soon after, you know.
So how long did it take for you to establish your career?
Quite long. after the first job that I mentioned earlier that I got from Brampton, they laid me off after 3 months before Christmas, and there was no hope of going back there, so I went back to Toronto, and I went to apply in other factory and worked there for a few years. And then there was a chance that came up that a friend that worked at a country-style donut shop as a baker, and who was an amazing baker, offered to train me and another friend of ours. So I took that. That was in 1985, a year after I got married. And I'll tell you my story of our marriage later. So I took that because I didn't have any skill at that time. So and the friend said, this kind of job pays very well. So I went to Cambridge, from Toronto to Cambridge with that friend for 4 months, 7 days a week for 4 months, and became a donut baker. That was my first career in Canada. So as soon as I finished that, I went and applied at Country Style head office, and they gave me a job, which I worked from 85 until 1990. So a few years with good pay, and I worked long hours. So it was good enough to support my whole family with some surplus that we could save to do other stuff. And I came here in 82, and then the following year, my younger brother, who is the youngest in our group, in our siblings, and my sister, who was just like next to me, was sponsored by the government, so they came to Canada, and they both went to English training school, and they got jobs, and they got their families, they got married, and they got their own families, and they all live in Mississauga now, while I live in the east side of Toronto, in Scarborough area.
Did they also leave as boat people?
Yes.
They made their escape to a
Yes.
refugee camp, and that's when they were
Yeah,
sponsored.
in a more dangerous situation than mine, because my brother could only manage to buy a very, very small boat that was built to carry like 2 or 3 fishermen in like a shore area, but because he didn't have anything else, he used that for 10 people. The way he could sink the boat and went, to the ocean, to the deep ocean. And it was like they accepted the 90% chance of failing and being killed on the ocean. But somehow God still blessed them and brought them, over safely, right?
And then you, after a few years working as a donut baker, you somehow got into graphics design?
Yes. Would you like to hear about my family story?
Oh,
and
yes,
then
of
I'll
course.
add that to the, because when I was in the island, in the refugee camp, I met with my wife, my future wife, whose name was Ding Thi Han, or in English you can call her Han Trinh. She was working with me as a volunteer in the Catholic Association, Catholic Youth Association. So we met in that organization's activities, and we fell in love. And the funny thing is, at that place, people got together, they became lovers, but a lot of people quickly forgot about it as they went to the third country. So there's a term called Galang Ting So. That means Galang, the love from Galang is not like a long-lasting love, something like that. It's just a term for fun, right? But we took it more seriously than that. Before I went to Canada, we promised each other that we would get connected again and go to the end, which means we would get married. And it happened in the Christmas time, 1983, like almost 2 years after I arrived in Canada. I bought a ticket to California, where she went to. She went half a year after I went to Canada. In secret, I didn't inform her. So at late night, I knocked on the door of her house, and her nephew went to open the door, and he was shocked seeing me. But then finally he realized that I wanted to do a surprise for everyone. So he went to her room and woke her up and said, Cậu Duy, who's Uncle Duy, is there, right? And she went to the living room and picked up the phone, and there was no one on the phone. And because when she got the message, she said I was there on the phone, right? So finally the nephew told her that Cậu Duy is there, and at the table waiting for you there, and she was shocked in a amazing way, and we kept keeping in touch until the summer of 1984, the next year. Saturday, July 7th, 1984, we got married in Santa Ana of Orange County, California. And then after that, I sponsored her to Toronto, where I decided to settle my life forever until I go back to Vietnam. And we've lived here since then, since 1984 until this day. And following our marriage in 84, then in July 85, we had our first son. And then the next year, by the end of October 86, we had our second son, and we named them Viet and Nam. The first one was Viet, and second one was Nam. So we called them together oftenly, Vietnam, Vietnam, where are you? So that's a way that we, we dedicate our love and our heart to our homeland, Vietnam. And every time we call them, we remember where we come from, who we are, where we come from, and what we're doing here. And if you have another minute, then I'll cover the next part, what you asked earlier, that I became a graphic designer. I actually never had a dream of becoming a excuse me, a graphic designer myself, but there was a chance that I was offered to become a partner of a print shop owner. So I decided to take it, and then the partnership relationship didn't work out well, in which I was kind of ignored or abandoned and left alone in a very unfortunate way, that I had to push myself to be on my own. So my shop was at 179 King Street East, Toronto, which is just across the street from George Brown College, the St. James campus. So I worked there every day until 6, and after 6 I closed the door. I locked the door and I walked across the street to George Brown College to take courses in graphics. It was called graphic design, advertising, and graphic design, promotion and advertising, something like that. It was like a large course topic, but I picked those related to the print shop work or requirements. So I pushed myself every day. I took like part-time courses, but I took enough to fill every evening, so it became like a full-time study program. And I pushed myself for a year, and I got enough training to do graphic. At that time, it was a thing called desktop publishing. So I learned that. I learned studio management. I learned professional copywritings and other graphic-related things and printing-related things. So it was helpful to do that, so that I managed to fulfill my work at the shop. At that time, we didn't have a lot of employees and other people to cooperate and help, so I rely almost solely on myself, and I pushed myself to the limit. And then I became a shop owner, a press operator, a finisher, a copy machine operator, and graphic design and stuff. I did everything myself, just like a multitask person.
And that was your career for the...
Yeah. I own only a part of the shop, but later on, because the partnership didn't work out very well, so I offered to buy the other people's shares, and I became the sole owner of that shop. And I operated that. Can you cut those words? I operated that from July 1990 up until October 2014. So it was slightly over 24 years. Long and tiring. And also, fortunately, through that, I was able to provide employment for quite a number of people, including a Canadian, Australian lady when she traveled to Canada and she needed some work, few Canadian people, and few Canadian Vietnamese or Vietnamese Canadian people.
So 40 years later now, how do you feel about the life that you and your family have made in Canada?
To be honest with you, I haven't been successful in business or financially, but I'm happy. I have a good family where my wife lives comfortably here. Our two sons grew up with every good thing that they would need, and both of them graduated from university. Our first son went to McMaster in Hamilton and had a bachelor degree in science, in health science, an honors bachelor. And our second son, Nam, graduated at U of T with a Bachelor of Science as well. And our first son, Viet, is now married with a beautiful wife, and they had their first son last year, back in April last year. So we have become grandparents. I'm a grandfather now, and our grandson, our first and only grandson for now, is Theodore, and he's like 15 months old and very cute. Would you like me to show the picture? No, it's okay. Go ahead.
How do you feel about the life that you've made?
Oh,
happy?
Yeah, I am completely happy and fully comfortable, and I'm fully grateful for what Canada has provided me with, or has given me, so that I managed to make a new life here with complete freedom, with democracy, with human rights and all the rights, all the basic rights that I could ask for, and all the opportunity to make my own living, to support my family, to feed my kids, to send them to school, to be successful in business if I was talented enough, or if I had enough ability, you know, or some other people that were so very successful in business and have made millions or billions of dollars and use it to help the society or the poor people everywhere. And all those are great opportunities that we wouldn't get from Vietnam or from any communist country or in a bad society. All those are available, and you can make things happen in Canada. I'm really grateful, and I owe Canada a big favor that I work hard and I try to live appropriately to repay every day in my life. Yes.
What can future generations of Canadians learn from your personal experience and Canada's response to refugee crises?
Yeah, I think the plan to help people that are in need, especially people that are from a communist country that don't have a way to live their own life, is a wonderful thing. It's a great thing and a must thing that the government of Canada should always be doing, or at least consider doing and push for it, because it helped a lot of people that have their lives at a dead end. And here we live in a society that is so amazing. It's beautiful. It's everything that someone could wish for in the world, whether they lived in the world. So we don't want to take things for granted, right? We don't want to waste all the blessings that we have here or keep them for our own. We must share. We must think of other less fortunate people and share the wealth that we have, the blessing that we have, all the benefits that we have, from God and from the nature. And I think that's what I like to use as a guide for my own self, and I like to bring that up to other people and suggest that we all have a goal of sharing, because when you go and spend something for yourself, then you lose something. But when you share your happiness, your blessing, it'll get multiplied. You don't lose anything at all. Believe me, And there are lots of people in the world that are dying every day. Children in Africa, in countryside of Vietnam, in India, that are dying every day because of lack of food and supplies. Why don't we share with them, right? And this country, this beautiful country, has the population of over 30 million, while the land area is like close to 10 million square kilometers, which is good enough for a few billion people. Why don't we share and accept more into this country, and make suffering people or less fortunate people live the life that we live here?
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and sharing your experience.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my own life and my journey and my experience and especially my debt to this beautiful country. Thank you.
So I have one follow-up question. Earlier you were talking about the importance of sharing and of giving to others. Could you talk about your involvement in the community in that light?
Well, sure. I'll be very happy to share with you that basically community is a big deal for me. I started as I first arrived in Canada in the first years from our church, which was the Vietnamese Martyrs community in the west end of Toronto. And I got involved with most of the lay movements there and worked with people like in the church choir and other groups, including teaching the Catholicism to people or teaching in the pre-marriage classes. So, and then later on we had another big group that was brought to Toronto from the U.S. That group is called the Family Enrichment Program, the Family Marriage Enrichment Program. That was created by Father Chu Quang Minh, which aims at improving couples' lives, especially when they have so much pressure and conflicts every day that normally lead to breakups, to divorce, right? So that was a very good group that I would recommend to any marriage couple or even common law couples. They can find out, because that has been expanded worldwide and available in most cities in North America and even in Vietnam and in Europe as well. So I worked with people in that group for many years as the vice president of the group, and we're still involved in that group. Excuse me. But I'm not in the executive board anymore. But still, me and my wife are active members of that group, and that group is divided into smaller divisions called Liên Gia, or inter-families, and we are in Liên Gia Hai, or inter-family number 2, which consists of about over 20 families or over 20 couples, which we meet every month to pray and to practice the Bible and share things in life, including good food. Every time we meet together is wonderful food that we have, because every housewife would do her best plate and bring it to be shared with everyone. So that's something about my community activities in church. And then after a few years, I stepped outside of the church environment and joined other community associations or groups or organizations, such as the Quang Ngai Friendship Association of Ontario, and I used to be the president of that association, and and I'm preparing to be elected again if no one would like to take that role. And you know, my pleasure is to be like a backup plan for most places or most everyone, so that if no one is there to bite the bullet, then I would try to do that myself. On top of that, I have been involved long term with a group called the Committee to Support Democracy Movement in Vietnam, which is a group that of people concerned about democracy activists in Vietnam, especially those that have been arrested, repressed, or abused, or imprisoned, that would need some help from outside of their family. Because in Vietnam, the communist regime has been treating their own people in a way that's very brutal, very inhumane, and very cruel. So they just want to take away or destroy any voice rising, raised. I mean, any voice raised for freedom, for humanity, for human rights, for democracy, or any voice asking for people's basic rights. Just like the right to live as a human being, they would find a way, or they would just, arrest you, throw you in a prison, get you tortured, or even killed just to, stop your voice. And because of all those, we were concerned, and we get together and do fundraising very often, so that we have some kind of support that we may be able to send to those people that are in prison for for raising their voices, or for their democratic activities. So that's one other thing that I and my wife have been involved for since 2007. So it's been quite a few years, 12 years. And on top of that, we have been involved in and volunteer in the the Toronto Vietnamese Women's Association, or VVAT. In Vietnamese, we call that Hội Phụ Nữ Việt Nam Toronto, for a couple of years, and help whenever they need it. And now we recently moved to another groups. And I myself have been a board member of the Vietnamese Association, one of the leading organizations in Toronto, in which we provide at the offices regular everyday services to newcomers, and we are funded by the governments of different levels, all three levels: City of Toronto, the government of Ontario, and the Canadian government, so that we could hire staff, rent office spaces, and provide quite a bit of services to newcomers for a number of years, or even a number of decades. And on top of that, we organize community events, such as the big New Year, the Vietnamese New Year Festival. For the last few years, we organized that at the International Center in the airport area. And every year there were ranging from 6,000 to 12,000 people gathering to celebrate the Vietnamese New Year. And during the year, we do other stuff like Viet Summer Festival that happened just on the 7th, July 7th, just over a week ago at Nathan Phillips Square. And other activities that we do, like picnic or youth Viet Summer Festival and stuff that we provide the Vietnamese Canadian with entertainment or chances that they get together to preserve, to enjoy and preserve the heritage, their cultural values and music and stuff, lots of things, you know. And I'm also involved in a few other organizations, such as the Vietnamese Canadian Voting and Advocacy Association, which I founded together with some other friends in the purpose of reminding and campaigning the Vietnamese Canadian people to go and exercise their civil duty by voting. You know, before that and before all the efforts from Senator Nguyen Ngoc Duy, the voting based on the statistic, the voting percentage of Vietnamese communities were kind of low. But after all those efforts together and other campaigns from other communities, that number was raised noticeably. Like it went from under 5% to 50, more or less, percent. So that was, I believe, a positive thing that you know, all Vietnamese people or Vietnamese Canadian may pay attention to and give a hand, so that we can prove to politicians, to the governments of all levels, that we are a community of understanding, of fulfilling our responsibility, basically a responsible community, and a community with real power that they should tap on. They should get to whenever they need votes from us to support their election campaign. And also a community that they should help and support in whatever the community members need, such as, you know, helping us create a community center or like a cultural center for the Vietnamese people in all the, you know, good-sized cities, for example, right? So, and other associations that I don't think we have enough time to mention, but basically, in my own philosophy, I believe that living my own life just for myself, or for myself and for my family, is not enough. I like to live for other people as well, especially people that are in need or people that are less fortunate. And in everyday's life, I like to be able to contribute a part of my time, part of my energy and my efforts to serving other people, you know, especially in the Vietnamese communities. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.